All right, today we're reading Counting and Skimming. We just learned that the Netta collared in Miss Patty Cake and Fern's upset. I took a bar of ivory soap in one of Cecile's washcloths and scrubbed at the black ink scrawled all over Miss Patty Cake. Big Ma taught me to be a hard washboard scrubber. Do not accept dirt, dust, or stains on clothes, floors, or walls or on ourselves. Scrub like you're a gal from a one-cow town near Prattville, Alabama, she'd tell me. Well, Vanetta and Fern ran around and played. You can't go on dreaming in your head or writing on the walls. That would only lead to ruin. I grabbed Miss Patty Cake's dimpled arms and chubby legs. I went after her cheeks and forehead. I scrubbed every nearly blacked out piece of practice, wearing down the ivory bar from a nearly full cake to half flat. I scrubbed and scrubbed until my knuckles ached. It was quite a job. When Vanetta picked up the black magic marker, she had been determined to make Miss Patty Cake as black and proud as Crazy Calvin wanted her to be. I soon found out it didn't matter if I scrubbed like a gal from a one-cow town, or if I gave up on the ivory soap and turned to stronger cleaners. While the heavy-duty cleaners and scouring pad lifted the black from the white bathroom sink, Miss Patty Cake's body was another story. The magic marker ink seeped down into Miss Patty Cake's soft plastic skin. At best, the Ajax, Pine Sol, and scouring pad left Miss Patty Cake gray, scratched up, and strong-smelling. Wow, I want you to imagine how disappointing this is for Delphine. Like, she's trying her best, and she still can't get her clean, and now, this doll is ruined. Like, this was her special thing. Hard scrubbing or not, there was nothing more I could do. Miss Patty Cake would never be Fern's baby doll, the way that she had been, as anyone could remember. I shook off the water from her insides, dried her off, and put her in my suitcase to spare Fern from seeing her baby doll grayish and ashy. I was too tired to try to make this thing between Vanetta and Fern wilt away. This wasn't exactly fighting over who gets the gold crown or the last cookie. I knew better than to ask for help from Cecile. Worn out, I began to see things like Big Ma did. There was no point in flying across the country for next to no mothering. I kept counting down the days. The best I could do was keep Vanetta and Fern separated. Vanetta bathed by herself, and Fern bathed with me. Vanetta slept on top of the daybed. Fern slept below with me. Fern no longer looked at the doll when we left Cecile's for breakfast. I wouldn't say Vanetta did Fern any favor, but maybe things worked out the way they could. Still, Vanetta remained proudly defiant, so that means confident and kind of rude. Walking steps ahead and leaving us our new friends, the Acons. The Acons were in sight. She and Janice, the middle Acon, threw pebbles at Hirohoto Woods and fussed over who hated him more. For snack time, Sister Pat passed out grapes. We ate our fill. Sister Makumbu gave us a lesson on California's grapes and how we had just eaten, and how the migrant workers who picked them had to fight for their rights. You've heard of Cesar Chavez? That's who they're talking about. They had to fight to make sure they were being treated fairly. I didn't think the lesson went the way Sister Makumbu planned. Everyone felt badly for having eaten the grapes. The room was quiet. Then Sister Makumbu announced free time for the next hour. All the kids went wild at the prospect of running around in the park for an hour, but Fern and I didn't feel like running around with them. Sister Pat had classes at the college and had to leave. When all the kids, except for Fern and I, ran to the park, I noticed Sister Makumbu if she had any chores or if she needed any help in the classroom. Not that I wanted her embarrassing me, having to stand up in front and rotate around the sun. It felt strange, my Timex tipping and me having nothing to do. If only I had brought my book with me. A lot of good. The Island of the Blue Dolphins did me snug inside my pillowcase. Sister Makumbu rose immediately. She had just the thing to keep me busy until class came for arts and crafts. She asked Fern and me to count the Black Panther Party weekly newspapers, stacking them crisscross every 50 copies. She said that the older kids would take them to local stores or sell the paper themselves. She made it sound like we were doing a great service by keeping the newspaper carriers more organized and accountable. It gave me something to do and Fern a reason to stick with me. Poor Fern. She didn't have a knack for counting. She was still angry and heartbroken about Miss Patty Cake. She couldn't get past 20 copies without losing her place and having to start over and over again. My stack of papers grew while she had yet to count her first 50. "Can't we go to the park and play?" she asked. I was tempted to let her go, and I said, "Come on, Fern, we have to get this done. All you have to do is count out 10 and lay them this way, then count out another 10 and lay them that way." I felt Sister Makumbu watching as I gave Fern a shirt cut. You know that someone's eyes are on your back, and whether it was a good thing or a bad way. I felt her watching us in a good way. Soon Fern caught on, counting and crisscrossing. Her stack of papers began to grow. Not as high as mine, but it grew. Fern was now busy and not missing Miss Patty Cake for a moment. After a short while, I felt Sister Makumboom's eyes read us. She must have figured we were all right and continued doing her own work. Since the Black Panther paper cost a quarter, I thought to myself I'd skim from the front and back pages as I counted the paper. I would read what I could see. I knew if I flipped the page over and read it by line, I was officially reading someone else's paper. Or as Pa would call it, stealing. Do you think this is stealing, to read the front page of a newspaper or the front page of a magazine? I don't really know, but I don't know. But I can see that Delphine has a lot of integrity because of this. I skimmed the first few pages of every 5 copies. I got into a real rhythm, counting and reading a few words each time. That's why this chapter is called Counting and Skimming. She would count the papers and read it. There was more artwork than printing on the first page, so I couldn't read much. One thing was for sure. I knew if Huey Newton had ever seen him on the street, you couldn't help but see Huey Newton all over the newspaper. His face was cocked slightly in the upper corner of the paper, like a president's face on a dollar bill. Now the Black Panther leader was in prison where he belonged, according to Big Ma. This is a really big different opinion than what Cecile and all the people at the rally have. As I counted, I dug Huey's corner picture, him wearing a beret looking cool and revolutionary. I flipped over in the newspaper quickly, skimmed the article in 5-second glances at a time, then flipped it closed. An article about Huey talking about Bobby. There was also a paragraph of people protesting that I wanted a better look at. There were people carrying the same signs that we colored in. Those could have been our sign. We were probably part of the revolution. Wouldn't that be a fine classroom essay, my revolutionary summer? I went back and read the paper, not skim, not skill. I wanted to fold the paper over, sit back and read every word. I must have lost count. I was busy imagining a Black Panther carrying the Free Huey sign, too busy to notice my neat stack of papers growing uneven, with either more or less than 50 newspapers. Sister Delphine, Sister Makumboom, stood before me with a smile on her face. "Nuts," Fern said, because Sister Makumboom's voice had startled her, making her lose count. She began to recount. "Yes, Sister Makumboom," I answered weakly. I hadn't even heard her get up from her chair or felt her eyes on my back. I didn't want to get lost in that. "Do you want to read a newspaper?" I was embarrassed. I'm not the kind to get embarrassed, but thank goodness she was a teacher and not some boy who could read the thoughts sitting in my head. Delphine's probably frustrated because she didn't want to be stealing, but she was so interested in what they were saying. I nodded yes, which only felt worse since I was not an otter. I dug out 2 dimes from last night's change. "I'll bring a nickel in tomorrow," she said. 20 cents will be fine, Sister Delphine. You're entitled to a worker's discount." I was too embarrassed to say thank you and gave her another nod. I took my newspaper and folded it neatly to read twice about Huey, Bobby, and the protesters later. Instead of 2 dimes of the 10 needed to call Ma and Big Ma, we were back to having no dimes. Fern and I kept counting and stacking, so she's probably really mad at herself because she wanted to make sure that she could call her family and talk to them, but now she ruined it because she was excited and wanted to read. So Delphine's probably like really torn and kind of confused. Maybe not confused, but she's definitely frustrated at herself. So basically, an overview. Fern's still mad. They couldn't fix Miss Patty Cake, and instead of going to play, they helped Sister Makumbu to make sure that they could get there. Yes, I agree.